My brother told me that if I wouldn't coordinate his entire wedding, I shouldn't bother showing up as a guest. My parents agreed with him instantly. So I withdrew the $22,000 I had committed and sent one text. Best of luck with the venue deposit. When he called back from the florist's parking lot, the conversation changed everything. The tension headache had been building since Monday. By Thursday night, it had graduated into something meaner, a tight band across my forehead that pulsed every time the office AC cycled on. I was sitting at my kitchen table at 11:43 at night, laptop open, empty mug pushed to the side, staring at a spreadsheet I had been building for 3 months. I was 31 years old, a project coordinator at a mid-sized architecture firm, and I had just finished the last line item in the most elaborate personal budget of my life. Column A, what I had promised. Column B, what I had already transferred. Column C, what was still pending. The total in column C read $22,400. That was my contribution to my brother's wedding. Not a loan, not a gift with strings. A contribution I had offered freely back in January when he called me crying because the venue deposit was due and his savings account had less than $800 in it. I had said, without hesitation, I'll cover it. Don't stress, I meant it. He was my brother. He was the kid I used to make cereal for before school because our parents left early for work. I would have done anything for him. The wedding was scheduled for the last Saturday in October, 11 days away. I reached for my phone to set an alarm and saw the notification. A text from my brother sent to the family group chat at 11:38 at night. He rarely texted that late unless he needed something. I opened it. His message was long. Longer than anything he'd ever sent in that chat, which normally existed for birthday reminders and the occasional photo of his dog. I read it once. Then I read it again more slowly, because the first time through I was sure I had misunderstood. I had not misunderstood. He wrote that he and his fiancée had been reviewing the wedding timeline and realized there were too many moving parts for them to manage, while also being, in his words, present as the couple. He said the wedding planner they had hired had quit 2 weeks ago, news to me, and that they had decided it made the most sense for me to step in and handle the day of coordination. Not just the day of. The rehearsal dinner set up the night before. All vendor communications starting immediately. Guest logistics, the seating chart revisions, florist confirmations, catering timeline, shuttle scheduling for the elderly relatives. He ended with, "You're great at this stuff. You do it for work, and honestly, you don't have a +1, so your hands will be free. We put you down for the coordination role. You're the best. Love you." I sat with that for a long moment. You don't have a +1, so your hands will be free. I had been single for 8 months, since a breakup that had cost me more emotionally than I ever let on to my family. I had been quiet about it because I didn't want to make my brother's engagement period about my own grief. I had been careful. I had been considerate. And now my empty hands were being treated as a staffing solution. I typed back carefully. I told him I loved him and I was so excited for the wedding, but I had to be honest. I was a guest, not a coordinator. I had taken the time off work to celebrate him, not to work a 12-hour event shift. I suggested he contact a day of coordinator service. They existed, they were affordable. I could even help him find one. The response came in 4 minutes. He said a coordinator would cost at least $1,500 and they didn't have it. He said I was being oversensitive. He said this was family and family helped each other. He said his fiancée was already overwhelmed and adding a coordinator search to her plate would send her over the edge. He said, and this is the part I read 4 times, "If you're going to show up as just a guest and not actually help, then honestly, maybe you shouldn't come at all. We need people around us who are in it with us, not just there for the open bar. Not just there for the open bar." $22,000, 3 months of payments, the venue deposit that saved the date, the catering minimum that locked in the menu, the florist retainer, the rehearsals dinner space rental, all of it from my account, transferred in careful increments so I didn't have to dip into my emergency fund. I put the phone face down on the table. My hands were steady, but my chest felt strange. Like something had been misaligned and I couldn't quite get a full breath. I thought about calling him. It was late, but I needed to hear if his voice matched his words, or if the text had been written in a moment of stress that his actual self would walk back immediately. I called. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," he said. He did not sound stressed. He sounded mildly inconvenienced, the way he sounded when he was waiting for food delivery. "Did you see my message?" "I did," I said. "I wanted to talk through it." "There's nothing to talk through, really." A sound in the background, his fiancée's voice, low and unintelligible. His hunch in the background, his fiancée's voice, low and unintelligible. "We just need to know you're on board so we can move forward. The rehearsal dinner is Friday night, and you'll need to be at the venue by 4 to let the florist in." "I'm not going to be there at 4 to let the florist in," I said. "I'm a guest at your wedding. I'll be there when guests are supposed to arrive." A pause. Then his voice changed, got quieter and harder at the same time. "I can't believe you're doing this right now. 11 days out. You know how much pressure we're under." "I know you're under pressure we're under." "I know you're under pressure," I said. "I've been helping carry that pressure for 3 months. I paid for the venue so you wouldn't lose the date. I paid for the catering deposit so you could keep the menu you wanted. I'm not refusing to help. I'm refusing to help your wedding. Those payments were a gift. They were. And I gave them freely. But a gift doesn't make me an employee." No one said anything about an employee. His voice had taken on the slightly nasal quality it got when he was building toward an argument. I had known that voice since we were children. "We said coordinator. It's one day. You do this for work. I do it for work because I get paid for it and I go home at the end of the day and it's not my family. This is different." "Because you're making it different." Another murmur from his fiancée. His voice came back with a harder edge. "Look, I talked to Mom and Dad about this already. They agree with us. We all think you're being precious about something that would take a few hours of your time. If you can't show up for your own brother when he actually needs you, then maybe we don't need you there. Come to the wedding ready to work or don't come. Come ready to work or don't come." I waited to feel something. Hurt maybe. Or the old familiar cave-in, the part of me that had been trained since childhood to smooth things over, to absorb the cost of his comfort. To decide that keeping the peace was worth more than keeping my dignity. I waited. It didn't come. What came instead was clarity. The kind that arrives not with noise but with stillness. "Okay," I said. "Okay, I'll do it." He sounded immediately relieved. "No," I said. "Okay, I understand your position." I hung up. For a few minutes, I just sat there in my kitchen with the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a car on the street outside. Then I opened my laptop again, not to the budget spreadsheet, to my bank. The wedding was 11 days away. The venue had a cancellation policy I had read very carefully when I signed the agreement because I was a project coordinator and reading the fine print was a professional instinct I could not switch off. Full refund or transfer of credit if cancellation was requested 14 days or more before the event. 50% credit if requested 7 to 13 days out. It was day 11. I was in the 50% window. If I canceled now, I would lose half. But if I did nothing and canceled in 3 more days, I would lose everything. I did some arithmetic. 50% of the venue deposit I had paid was $4,000. That was real money. Money I did not want to lose. But I had paid nearly $6,000 to the catering company, and their contract had a different clause, a change of payer provision I had insisted on when we signed it because I was not going to have my name on a contract where someone else could run up costs. Under that clause, if I formally withdrew as the paying party, the contract would revert to the couple, who would need to either pay the existing balance themselves or renegotiate. I also had a receipt for the florist retainer, $2,500, paid directly to the owner, not to my brother's account. I checked the email thread. The retainer was refundable within 12 days of the event date if the cancellation came from the original depositing party. 11 days. I was still in the window. I did not click anything yet. I needed to understand what I was actually doing before I did it. I was not impulsive by nature. I like to see the whole board before I move to peace. I thought about my brother, not the man who had just told me to come ready to work or stay home. The boy who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during long car trips. The teenager who called me from college the first week, homesick and embarrassed about being homesick, making me promise not to tell their parents he'd cried. I had loved him for 30 years. I still loved him. That was not in question, but love is not a blank check. I had been treating it like one for a long time. I thought about the last 5 years. The furniture I had helped him move 3 times. The car payment I had quietly covered when he was between jobs. The security deposit on his current apartment, $4,000, called a loan, never repaid, never mentioned again. The laptop I bought for his fiancée when hers died 2 weeks before her graduate school finals. The small amounts that had accumulated, never ledgered, never acknowledged, just absorbed into the general understanding that I was the capable one, the one with the good job and the organized life, the one who could handle it. I had built a life I was proud of. I worked hard for it. I saved carefully. I planned. And somewhere along the way, my competence had been reclassified by my family, quietly and without my consent, from an achievement into a resource. I went back to the family group chat. My parents had replied after I'd put the phone down. My mother wrote, "Honey, your brother is a nervous wreck. You know how he gets? Just say yes and it'll all be fine. It's one day." My father wrote, "You're the organized one. Nobody else can do this. Don't let him down right before the wedding. Family takes care of family. Nobody else can do this." What they meant was nobody else would do it for free, on 11 days' notice, while also smiling for photos and pretending to have a good time. I sat back in my chair and looked at the ceiling for a long moment. Then I started making calls. The florist picked up on the second ring. She kept late hours. She had mentioned that during our initial consults. I explained the situation calmly and professionally. She was quiet for a moment and then said, "Honey, this is not the first time I've gotten this kind of call." She confirmed the refund and said she'd have the check processed by Monday. The catering manager was less warm but equally efficient. I walked him through the change of payor clause. He sighed, asked me to send a formal email in the morning, and confirmed the contract would revert to the couple. The venue was the complicated one. A partial loss was unavoidable. I accepted it. $4,000 was a painful number, but it was the price of drawing a line at day 11 instead of day 14, which was when I would have needed to act if I'd been paying better attention to my own emotional state. I sent the formal emails. I documented everything. I set an out-of-office confirmation to capture any vendor replies. Then I opened the group chat. I wrote, "I've thought about this and I have to be honest with all of you. I came into this wedding as someone who wanted to support you, not work your event. When I made those payments, they were a contribution between family members, not a purchase of my own labor. Tonight I was told that if I wouldn't perform coordination duties, I shouldn't come. I'm taking that seriously. I've contacted the venue, the florist, and the caterer to begin the process of withdrawing my payments and reverting contracts to the couple's names. The details will come to you in writing from each vendor. I love you. I'm sorry this is how it ended up." I turned off notifications. I did not sleep well, but I slept. By 7 the next morning, my phone had accumulated 46 notifications. I made coffee first. Stood on my small balcony in the early gray light, wrapped in a sweater, and drank it slowly. Then I sat down and read through them in order. My brother had called 9 times and sent 11 texts. They started confused, then escalated through disbelief into a kind of cold fury I recognized from adolescence. His fiancée had messaged me separately once, and it was actually the most measured of everything. She said she was upset, but she wanted to understand what had happened. I noted that and set it aside. My mother called while I was still on the balcony. I answered. "Grace, what have you done?" Not a question. A verdict. "I withdrew my financial contributions," I said. "The contracts have been transferred back to them. The venue called us this morning." Her voice was tight. "They want the full balance within 10 days or they release the date." I know. That's what the contract says. "Do you understand what you've done? The wedding is 11 days away. Your brother doesn't have this money." I know that too. "Then how could you—" Her voice broke slightly, then hardened. "This is selfish. This is the most selfish thing you have ever done. Your brother is about to get married, and you're punishing him over some disagreement about a to-do list." "It wasn't a to-do list," I said. "He told me to come ready to work or not come at all. I chose not to come. That includes not continuing to fund an event I've been disinvited from. Silence on the line. You are not disinvited. He told me specifically that if I wasn't willing to do the coordination work, I shouldn't come. Those were his words. He was stressed. He didn't mean it literally. He also said I was only there for the open bar. He meant that literally enough. Another silence, longer. I could hear my father in the background, his voice low and urgent. You have the money, my mother said finally. You have savings. You can reinstate those contracts today and nobody has to know any of this happened. I could, I said. Then do it. Do it for your brother. Do it for this family. No, I said. The word landed in a way I hadn't quite anticipated. I had said it before, of course, but never to this particular question, never with this much at stake, never without immediately feeling the pull to walk it back. This time, I just let it sit there. No? My mother's voice went flat. No? Just like that? Your brother's wedding is going to fall apart, and you're saying no? My brother's wedding may fall apart, I said. That's not something I did. He had a funded event 11 days ago. What happened since then is a series of choices he made. You are unbelievable. Her voice went cold in a way I hadn't heard in years. If this wedding falls apart, I want you to know that we will never forgive you for it. Do you understand me? Never. I understand, I said. She hung up. I went inside, poured the rest of my coffee down the drain because it had gone cold, and made a fresh cup. The next 2 days were quieter than I expected. My brother stopped calling by the second afternoon, which I suspected meant he had shifted into problem-solving mode and was dealing with the practical fallout. My father sent one long email, formal and disappointed in tone, which I read fully and did not respond to. My mother sent a photo of my brother and his fiancée looking sad, no caption, which I recognized as emotional leverage and closed without engaging. What I did not expect was the call from his fiancée on day 3. She caught me on my lunch break eating at my desk, half distracted by a work email. Her voice was tired, not angry. She said, I owe you an apology. I put my fork down. She told me she had seen the original message my brother sent to the group chat, the one with the coordination list, only after it was already sent. She had not agreed to it in advance. She had been asleep when he typed it. When she woke up and read it, she told him it was too much to ask, but he had already decided that she said, you, then corrected to my name, that I would do it because I always did. Because I always did. Because I always did. She said she was embarrassed. She said she had been too overwhelmed with everything to call sooner. She said the venue had agreed to a 90-day payment plan, which they were going to try to make work, and that she had called the florist herself and personally rebooked using a credit card she hadn't touched in 2 years. She said the wedding was happening, smaller and more chaotic, but happening. She said, he loves you. He's just been terrible at showing it, and I let him be, which is on me too. I sat with that for a long moment. I told her I appreciated the call more than she knew. I told her I hoped the day was everything she wanted it to be. She asked if I would come. I told her I needed some time to think about it. I did think about it. For several days I thought about it. I thought about the boy and the man he had become, and the ways those two things were and weren't the same. I thought about my own part in the pattern, not the withdrawal, which I stood behind, but the decade before it, the quiet accumulation of unchallenged assumptions, the ways I had made myself easy to take for granted by never costing anything. There is a version of this story where I go to the wedding, and it's fine, and we never talk about it again, and the pattern continues in some mutated form for the rest of our lives. I chose a different version. I called my brother 4 days before the wedding. He picked up after one ring, which told me he had been waiting. I told him I loved him. I told him I was proud of him for figuring out the vendor situation without my help, which he had. I told him that what had happened was not only about one text message or one coordination list. It was about a long and unexamined assumption that had been building for years. The assumption that my stability was a resource for the family to draw on. That my competence meant I had no needs. That my generosity had an unlimited supply. I told him I needed that to change. Not as a condition of my love, but as a condition of my sanity. He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough and he stumbled over a few words, which he almost never did. He said, "I didn't realize how much I'd been taking. I don't know when it started. I'm sorry." We talked for almost 2 hours. It was not a perfect conversation. He got defensive twice and I had to wait it out. But underneath the defensiveness was something genuine. I have known my brother for 31 years. And I know when he means something and when he doesn't. He meant it. I went to the wedding. I was a guest. I sat in a third row and cried when his fiancée walked down the aisle. Because she was radiant and because he looked at her the way people look at things they cannot believe they get to keep. I danced at the reception. I ate the dinner. I did not manage a single logistical detail. The coordination was handled by a colleague of his fiancée's who stepped in at the last minute, working for a discounted fee. It went fine. Events almost always go fine when the people involved are motivated and prepared. In the months after, things were different. Not fixed. I don't think family dynamics fix the way appliances do, but different. My brother called more, for no reason, just to talk. He paid back $800 of the old security deposit, unsolicited, with a note that said, "Working on the rest." He didn't ask me for anything for almost 4 months, and when he did it was small, a ride to the airport, and he offered to pay for gas. My parents took longer. The chill in my mother's voice lasted through November, but one Sunday in December she called and asked if I wanted to come for dinner. Just dinner, nothing else needed from me, just to sit together. I said yes, we are figuring it out. As for the money, the $4,000 I lost in the venue cancellation, I've thought about it. Some people in my life have called it an expensive lesson. I don't see it that way. I see it as the cost of a boundary I should have set years ago, amortized over a decade, which makes it cheaper per year than the therapy I started last spring. My therapist, who has never once told me what to do, made one observation that I keep returning to. She said, "You spent a long time making yourself easy to take for granted. Becoming harder to take for granted is going to feel like loss to the people who benefited from the old version. That's not the same as you being wrong." I wrote that down and put it on my refrigerator. I am 31 years old. I am a project coordinator at an architecture firm, and I am good at my job, and I protect my weekends. I have savings and a small apartment and a cat I adopted in January named after a jazz musician. On the last Saturday in October, I watched my brother marry someone who loves him and who, I am quietly convinced, will hold him to a higher standard than he has sometimes held himself. That is enough. That is enough. That is more than enough. You cannot buy belonging in a family. You can fund a wedding and still be a stranger at it, or you can walk in with empty hands and be completely home. The difference has nothing to do with money and everything to do with whether the people in the room actually see you. I spent a long time waiting to be seen. I am done being patient about it. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what actually happened that October, and the honest answer is that the ending didn't start with the text message or the withdrawal or the phone call from the florist's parking lot. It started much earlier, in the small quiet moments when I said yes when I meant no, when I transferred money without being asked, when I made myself so easy to rely on that reliability became expectation, and expectation became entitlement. I built that dynamic as much as anyone. That's not self-blame. That's just accuracy. There's something that happens when you are competent and generous inside a family system. People don't mean to exploit you. Not usually, not consciously. What happens is softer and more insidious than that. They simply stop accounting for you. Your needs become invisible, not out of malice, but out of habit. You handled it last time. You'll handle it this time. And because you never said otherwise, because you smoothed the discomfort and absorbed the cost, the habit calcifies into assumption. By the time my brother told me to come ready to work or stay home, he genuinely did not understand why that was unreasonable. He had been trained, partly by me, to believe that my capabilities existed for his benefit. That realization doesn't make what he said acceptable. It just makes it explainable. And there's a difference between those two things that I had to get very clear on before I could move forward without bitterness. What I did when I withdrew those contracts was not revenge. I want to be precise about that, because I've heard it described that way, including by my own mother. It was not punishment. It was the first time in a long time that my actions matched my actual position. I was not his employee. I was not his employee. I was his sister, and sisters are allowed to have a limit. The hard part, the part nobody warns you about, is that setting a limit feels like a loss to everyone who benefited from the limitless version of you. My mother's anger was real. My brother's panic was real. That wasn't performance. They genuinely experienced my boundary as a betrayal, because from inside the system they had built, it looked exactly like one. That doesn't mean I was wrong, it means the system needed to break. What I know now, months later, with my brother paying back old debts in installments and my mother calling on Sunday evenings just to talk, is that the break was necessary. Not pleasant, not clean. Necessary. The relationships I have with them now are more honest than anything we had before, because they are no longer built on a foundation of my unchecked giving. They are built on something more equal, more effortful, and therefore more real. I am still a generous person. I don't think what happened changed that. But I am generous now, in ways I choose deliberately, not in ways I drift into out of old childhood conditioning. The difference feels like the difference between giving someone a gift and dropping your wallet and letting them take what they need. I kept a note on my refrigerator that said something my therapist observed: that becoming harder to take for granted would feel like loss to people who benefited from the old version of me. That is true. I watched it be true in real time. And I stayed anyway because some losses are actually corrections. And the only way through them is to stop apologizing for the clarity they bring.